Welcome to OneSoccer's comprehensive 2023 NWSL season preview. Today, to help me do this, I've brought on special guest, Canadian Youth International Jessica Lisi. And today, we'll be going through all 12 NWSL clubs, but with a main focus on our Canadian players. And we're going to start things off with the Portland Thorns. There's two very impressive players on this team. There's Janine, Beckie, and there's Christine Sinclair. But there's a little more to the Thorns going on this year because there was some off-season controversy that kind of happened as former Canadian international Reen Wilkinson stepped down from the job, and the Thorns did bring in a new replacement in Mike Norris. And he had this to say: there's a natural hunger, drive, and desire within this group, right? It's a winning group. What are your thoughts about the Thorns and all the off-season situations that they had going on?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth behind that statement that Mike Norris made. I've actually had the opportunity to play under Mike Norris. He was the goalkeeper coach for my youth teams. And he was always somebody that was, very motivating. He was great to play under, great presence to have there. So I have no doubt that, he'll be a great leadership, be in a great leadership role there and really bring the best out of the women. This team has shown time and time again that they are very capable of winning. In the last 9 playoffs, they've made 8 appearances. So that's more than any other team in NWSL, as well as 3 championships. That's very difficult to do. It shows a lot of what this team is all about. And I do think that regardless of anything going on, outside of those white lines, it's not going to affect this team. And I think that they'll continue to have success this year.
Now, one of the biggest changes that I've already noticed is in that starting 11, we see Janine, Beckie in there. What do you think goes behind that decision?
Yeah, I think there's a lot that goes into this decision. We've seen Beckie play in multiple different positions, and she's done them all quite well. More recently, we've seen her play in that fullback position, which I personally do really love her in that role. I do think that Lindsay Horan being at loan at Lyon can potentially play a role when she comes back in where Janine is best fitted. Maybe we'll see her move into a fullback role. I'm not really sure, but I do think that overall, Janine is a solid player, and anywhere that she is on that pitch, she's making a difference.
The other name in this lineup that we'll be watching, of course, is Christine Sinclair, who obviously needs no introduction. She's the world's all-time top scorer at international level with 190 goals and 322 appearances for Canada. And she scored a healthy number of goals for Portland as well. How important will Sinclair-Beckie combination be at Canada's World Cup this summer, Jess?
I think if we're looking at a lineup where Beckie is playing out wide and Sinclair is in that 10 role, potentially even in that 9 role, it is really important and it's great. Ideal world, you want your players on the women's national team playing together at the club level, because what's better than having more time to play together to build that relationship and that connection on the flank? You want Sinclair to know where Beckie likes to have the ball played or at what pace. You want her to know everything about what Beckie loves. Obviously, we don't know where Sinclair or Beckie will be playing for the World Cup. Will Beckie be filling that fullback role? I personally, like I said before, I do really enjoy her in that role. I actually think Sinclair should be moved back up to a 9 position and play more of a traditional 9, which doesn't require her to be as mobile as she is required to be in that 10 role. She has struggled a little bit to be as active. I would like to see maybe a Jessie Fleming move in there. But overall, again, perfect world, you want your players to be playing together at the club level, considering there isn't very much time before that World Cup. So yeah, I think this is amazing for them to be on the same team and build that connection and that chemistry. So I'm excited. I'm excited for them. I'm excited as a Canadian to see this happen. But yeah, so I definitely think it's good.
Yeah, and with Horan out on loan at Lyon, there's a good opportunity for Beckie to take that starting spot up front as well in the wide positions. But we're going to switch our attention now because we mentioned Lyon, we mentioned loan, and that's where Vanessa Gilles is. So we're going to focus on her parent club, Angel City FC. There's a fair bit of change at Angel City FC this year as the Los Angeles-based club looks to reach even higher heights in 2023 after finishing 8th last season. And for the club president, Julie Ehrman, that's not good enough. This is a club with huge goals, right, Jessica?
Yeah, definitely. And I love to see this. I never thought that I'd be sitting here talking about this and showing how far the women's game has come. The fact that, they want to be the first women's pro team to have $1 billion valuation is amazing, as well as, they have those big hitters behind them. They have people like Natalie Portman, or they have Serena Williams or Mia Hamm. Those are all big names out there supporting them. So it is really great to see. And unfortunately, they finished 8th last year. And I don't think that quite shows what they're capable of. So I definitely believe that they're going to go for anything higher than 8th this year, and they definitely have the ability to do it.
I think so as well. And if we look at this starting 11, there's definitely a couple players that you notice that aren't there as 2 starters. Tyler Lucy and Carrie Ricario have both departed the club. But what do you make of this predicted starting 11?
Yeah, well, you see Sydney Leroux. Obviously, she's a great player. She's a force to be reckoned with. She's also Canadian-born, but she is playing on the U.S. women's national team. Again, great player. And then you go over to someone like Kristen Press. She is making her way back to full fitness, but she is a fantastic player as well. And when she's out there, she is not somebody you want to be defending against. And then you also have, the youth of Alyssa Thompson coming in. She was the first overall pick from this last 2023 draft for Angel City. So very exciting names in the mix. You also have a bunch of other players out there that are going to make a massive difference. So overall, a lot remains unchanged. So I do think that they obviously have a very solid, talented group here, and it's just about bringing it all together, because I definitely think that they have the ability to be great this year.
I agree too, but when I'm looking at this back line, though, there is one big name that's not there, and that's Canadian defender Vanessa Gilles.
Yeah, Vanessa Gilles, obviously we know that she was on contract with this team in 2022. She had the potential for a 2023. So she is right now on loan in France for Lyon. That ends on June 30th. So she will be missing the first 3 months of this league. But unfortunately, she'll also be back for only a couple weeks before she leaves for the World Cup. So this team is definitely going to have to make do without her if they feel that she is a big part of that back line.
Now, when Gilles comes back to Angel City FC, do you think she's going to be worried potentially about her game time, or could we maybe even see her stay at Lyon a little longer, or maybe even be bought permanently?
I mean, I think it's, naive to think that that's not a potential, that she doesn't come back, or that she permanently leaves and leaves NWSL and goes back to Europe. We've seen her, in Europe before. She was playing for Lyon. She was playing for another squad in France. So, I think if you're at the level where to come back and think that your time is promised is not the right call. Your time is never promised when you're on a squad like this. So I definitely think that there's potential for her to come back, because she is a great player and get that starting role, but you never know, because it has been filled by someone else for the time that she's been gone. But yeah, it's definitely a possibility that she doesn't start, or that she potentially stays in Europe.
Well, now it's time to move on to OL Reign, who also have two very important players for the Canadian women's national team. And let's start off with Quinn.
Yeah, as far as key players go in the middle of the park, there are a few options quite as consistent as Quinn has been for OL Reign. Each year Quinn gets more and more playing time, getting triple the amount of appearances in 2022 as they did in 2019. A very composed player who has the ability to control the game, whether that's through simple short passes or the long ball that we've seen them play time and time again. Quinn has bounced in and out of Beth Priestman's starting lineup as Canada experiments with midfield duo of Jessie Fleming and Julia Grosso, but it's looking more and more likely that Quinn will figure into Canada's World Cup roster, especially if they head into the summer on a solid run of form.
Now, there's another player to focus on out of Seattle as well, and it's one of the biggest names around Canadian soccer, and that is Jordan Huitema. Jess, how important do you think Huitema is going to be to OL as well as Canada this year?
Yeah, I think Jordan has always been a part of Canada soccer that so many people have spoken about. She obviously does have the ability to score goals, but unfortunately, she hasn't really showcased her ability against top opponents. She's been very inconsistent at that high level. Again, that's not to say that she doesn't have the ability, because I do personally believe that she does. We've seen her score goals. We've seen her use her height in the box and be a great poacher in and around the box. But unfortunately, again, I'm not totally convinced that she is that number 9 that Canada needs right now. As for Seattle, I do think that she did great when she stepped into her role there. So I do think that she deserves that starting position there. But as for, again, with Canada, I'm just not quite convinced yet. I think that number 9 role is very up in the air. I do think Sinclair should go back there. But, as for Huitema playing a massive role, it would be great to see her play that role and put the team on her back and be the one scoring the goals and bringing them to championships. But unfortunately, I just haven't seen that from her.
She'll definitely have to use this season as a big opportunity to potentially take that next step in her game. But now we were switching to the Houston Dash, who have the healthiest contingent of Canadian internationals in their roster with 4 key players: Alicia Chapman, Sophie Schmidt, Nichelle Prince, and Devin Kerr.
Yeah, and then not only do they have the most Canadians, but they also play the most Canadians week in and week out too.
They absolutely do. And the nice thing is that Alicia Chapman, as we know, is only 5 matches away from her 100th appearance for Canada. What do you expect from her this season?
Yeah, Alicia Chapman, one of the most admirable qualities about her for me personally is how tenacious she is. She brings this tenacity that you don't see in a lot of players, but you do hope that they will bring it to the pitch when they step on there. So, we've seen her play in multiple different roles for Houston. We've seen her play in the back 3 as one of the wide defenders. We've also seen her play as a fullback, which is where we're typically seeing her play for Canada. And we've also seen her play in the wide midfield role. So in all 3 of those roles, every single time she steps on the pitch, you are are going to get a player that's going to give 100% and put their body on the line, you can always count on her for that. She is going to bring that tenacity, and she's not going to let you buy her. And if you do get by her, she'll probably figure out a way to stop you. So definitely a player that is always going to bring 100%. So definitely for Houston and Canada both, I would expect to see that.
Yeah, and speaking of players who bring 100%, we're going to move over now to the midfield, and that is Sophie Schmidt. Very consistent player, one of my favorite players to watch as well. And it's important to note that Schmidt is Canada's second most capped player with 220 appearances. Although she nearly stepped away from the national team ahead of the 2023 She Believes Cup, although she was convinced to stay on for the World Cup. How important will she be to Houston this season?
Yeah, I think she's going to play a massive role for Houston. Obviously, we know that Schmidt is a great player. She brings a lot of her experience when she steps on the pitch. It's very obvious that she has that experience. She's able to strike a ball very well. She's great at switching the play, great vision of the field to really thread those balls through, as well as play simple when necessary. I am somebody that's very much for honoring the past and players like Schmidt who have continued to show that they're great. But I'm also a big advocate for, the youth that's coming through the program and have earned spots. So in regards to her spot in the national team and in the starting 11, I do think that she deserves to be on the national team, but I think her role has changed where she's a lot more useful coming off the bench. I don't think that she can necessarily compete with a Jessie Fleming or a Grosso. I do think that she brings a lot to the field again when she steps on it with her experience, but definitely think she's a little bit better suited right now for where she's at as a sub.
And someone else who brings a lot to the field as well in terms of goals is Nichelle Prince, and we've seen her do it for Canada, and now are we going to see her do it for potentially Houston this season?
Yeah, I hope so. Nichelle Prince is a great player. She's been the most consistent, I would say, for Canada in regards to being an attacking presence. We've seen players like Leon do great things for Canada over the past year, but I would say Nichelle Prince is a constant attacking threat for Canada's front three. Obviously, wishing her a speedy recovery and hoping that she is very much back in the mix for Canada for this World Cup. That would be tremendous, as well as for Houston. So obviously she has shown that she is the most productive Canadian in the NWSL over the last 6 years. She is consistent. In the last 2022 season, she had 6 goals and 2 assists in 25 appearances, which also puts her in the mix for the league's overall most productive player at 18th. So I do believe that when she is back at full health, she'll be a great addition to both squads for sure.
And finally, we will take a look at Devin Kerr, who is a backup keeper for Houston and doesn't play a lot for them, but she has been called up for the Canadian women's national team, although she's never actually made an appearance. So Jess, what does Kerr have to do this season to potentially fight her way into the starting 11 and to fight in Canada?
I actually played with Devin. I grew up playing with her. We played in the Rex program together and provincials, and she's great. She's a great keeper. She works very hard. To see her where she is awesome. In regards to, stepping into that role, obviously she has to beat out a keeper like Jane Campbell, who has time and time again proven herself. She's tied 5th overall for clean sheets. Last year, she only conceded 28 goals. So this thing is, you come in, you do what you know how to do and continue to work hard in training, and you might get your moment. And when you do get your moment, you really have to step up to it. Obviously there's national team duties. There is injuries that happen. You just never know when they're going to come knocking for you to get that opportunity to play, and you never know who's watching. And I think in Devin's case, it would be really helpful if she can string along, a bunch of games where she's playing well and Bev Priestman is watching, because she's definitely keeping tabs.
Absolutely she does. And speaking of some other Canadians who are looking for opportunities, let's go through some of the solo Canadians playing across the NWSL. First up will be Gabrielle Carle at the Washington Spirit.
Yeah, this is a player who's making her NWSL debut, having spent 2022 in Sweden. She's obviously joining a team that could definitely use her talents. At the end of the day, Gabrielle Carle is a really talented player. We've seen her play for the national team, and she brings speed and she has that hunger. She's a great defender, but she's also very versatile, and you can see her play as a winger. You can see her play as a midfielder. So she's a really great player, and I do think Washington Spirit will really be able to use her, considering they did finish 11th. It is interesting, this whole thing, the fact that she, why did she choose to come to the NWSL when she should be in Europe? This quote here really, shows that. And there was a bit of a deeper thing here. She did mention that off the field, the NWSL is a lot more professional in how they treat their players, and she felt that this was a better place for her. So again, I do think this is the right move for her, both as a player and obviously as a person. She felt that she was better fitted in the US. But I'm excited for her and this next journey. Again, she did do well in Sweden, so I'm excited to see what she can do in the NWSL.
Yeah, I think she'll be a good fit as well. I think that she's in the right stage of her career to maybe come back here. And we're going to be moving on now to Gotham FC, where there's one Canadian, and that is Victoria Pickett.
Yeah, Victoria Pickett, I've also had the opportunity to play with Pickett, and she is one of those players. If she is running at you, you better get out of the way because she will probably embarrass you. She is so great with her feet. She's quick. She's fast. She's also very smart. And one of the biggest things about Pickett is her mentality is unmatchable. If you're taking the ball off of her, she is not staying down. She's going to come back and get you. So very exciting player. I am glad to see that she was getting a lot more minutes this year. Unfortunately, even as she was getting those minutes, she didn't record any goals or assists for them, and they did finish dead last. So that is a bit of a tough position to be in. But they have added some heavy hitters in with Kelly O'Hara and Lynn Williams. So hopefully Pickett can add some productivity to her play in 2023 and potentially be an option for Bev to bring into that national team again. She has been called in. We saw her even for the She Believes Cup. She was called into the camp, obviously didn't make the final roster, but she is still in the mix. So it is really exciting for her.
Next up is Jordan Listro at Orlando Pride, and this is another player who is maybe on the fringe of making the World Cup squad. So Jess, what do you think she needs to do this season in the NWSL to potentially get away into that World Cup roster spot?
Yeah, she is one of those players. She's one of Canada's few, natural number sixes. We don't have a lot of those. A lot of players are being transitioned into a number six role, such as a Julia Grosso. So it is really interesting to see that, she hasn't been called back into the mix. She is a great player. She's very solid in her position. She plays simple. She works really hard, and she knows her position well. She's not the person that's doing anything fancy, but she's getting the job done, and she's really fighting to that final whistle. So again, she is a great player, but it is a little bit of a hard position to be in. At the end of the day, we have seen Bev very rarely sway from Jessie Fleming and Julia Grosso. She is really trying to build that partnership. So I'm not really sure if Listro, fits in at the moment. I do think that if Fleming does move up to that 10 role, Quinn is going to be the next person that steps into that role. You also have Desiree Scott that's going to be on the bench. She's also a natural six. So it's a little bit of a hard position to be in. I'm not sure if there's anything she can do to really get on that World Cup roster, but I do think that her performing, there's just not enough time, but I do think that her performing consistently well in this season can definitely get her back in the mix. And, again, she's a great player and it would be great to see her get some time, but it just doesn't seem like there's enough time right now for her to go in and really earn a spot.
Now, one player that I would think is probably pretty confident about making the World Cup roster is Kaylin Sheridan, who I think is going to be probably in for a pretty big season.
Yeah, Kaylin Sheridan has come up huge for Canada. Obviously, Canada's starting goalkeeper, starting for San Diego. She's been making waves, pun intended,
Nice.
everywhere. Everywhere she goes. The most recent time that we've seen her really come up huge for Canada is in the She Believes Cup against the U.S. as well as against Brazil. Those results could have been very different had it not been for her. So, it is great to see that she's been showcasing her abilities. She's made huge saves time and time again for Canada as well as San Diego. She only conceded 20 goals last season. She had 8 clean sheets, which is the third most across the league in 2022. So she's definitely got a bright future for her club and her country both.
Now, I think it's pretty cool to see as Kaylin Sheridan, as well as obviously plenty of other Canadians, are going to be going into FIFA 23 this year, because on March 15th, the NWSL is coming in, and Sheridan's got an overall rating of 85. So it's pretty cool for just in general, the fact that the NWSL is coming in. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's exciting. I saw this just the other day, and I think that the fact that we are where we are and we're seeing, the NWSL be put into FIFA 23 is amazing. And as a player before, I would have never thought that we would be here. I know that there's probably a lot of women that are about to pick up some controllers and play FIFA 23. I'm definitely one of them. Super, super exciting. It's just honestly a great step forward, and it's great to see these women get the recognition they deserve and, be on a platform like FIFA. So definitely excited about it.
So on a level of 1 to 10, Jess, where's your skill?
I'm like a 1, maybe.
You're like a 1.
I don't seem very excited.
No, it's okay. A lot of time to practice, Mel. A lot of time to practice.
Yeah,
We're good.
A lot of time.
But maybe a bright future in FIFA one day. But someone who does have a bright future, we're going to be going over to Chicago to take a look at Bianca St. George's.
Yeah, Bianca St. George's is one of those, she's a very offensive-minded defenseman. I know that sounds kind of funny, but she is definitely that player that is getting up and down the flank. I was honestly a little bit surprised that she, didn't make the She Believes roster. I wasn't sure if she had injuries or whatnot, but I do think in the end it was just concluded that she didn't make that squad. She is a great player. She's shown that she can get in that final third and create. She had 2 assists as well as 2 goals last year for them in only 15 games. So she is used as a right back. She's also used as a right midfielder. So she is a very versatile player. So she definitely is somebody that I do believe is still in the mix for Bev. That fullback position for Bev is still very open, especially with Jade Revere not being 100% as of yet. I know she's in recovery, but again, that spot has to be earned back. So I do think that's really open right now. And there's quite a few people that are going to be fighting for that position. And I don't see why St. George's wouldn't be in that mix.
And finally, we have Desiree Scott over at the Kansas City Current. How vital will she be for her side this year as well for Canada?
We know how important having a veteran like Desiree Scott is on the field, obviously being able to command everyone around her, being able to control the play and really stay in her position. And again, just help everyone around her is the biggest thing. She's a great leader. We've seen her do so much for Canada. She is coming back from injury right now, but I do think, as for her role with Kansas City, I do think that's her position to lose. I think if she comes back and is all ready for it, then that's definitely her starting position. As for Canada, I do think, again, kind of like what we were speaking about with Sophie Schmidt, it's not that they're not great. They're absolutely amazing still, and they've proven time and time again how great they are. But I do think that, other youth players have stepped into their role, and that Desiree Scott, along with like a Sophie Schmidt, add a lot of value off the bench because of their experience. So yeah, definitely think that she's going to be a big player for both Canada and Kansas City.
And of course, as we all know, Desiree Scott was honored with the Order of Manitoba this offseason. So a huge congratulations goes out to her and her off-field success. Very cool for her. She rounds out her Canadian contingent in the NWSL, but there are still a couple more teams that we need to go through, and we will start with North Carolina Courage.
Yeah, even though they don't have these Canadians, we love to talk about all these NWSL teams. So, obviously you see this from this graphic. North Carolina added 3 key faces this season in Millie Gale, as well as Tyler Lucy and Emily Fox. All 3 players very solid. This is a team that finished 7th last season, and we'll hope those 2 new forwards can push them to a higher spot in a deeper playoff run in 2023. Even though they did score the second most goals in 2022 with 46 goals, it's really interesting that they didn't make it much further. But, I do think that these 2, as well as Emily Fox in the back, will really add a lot of depth to this team and hopefully help them get a little further.
And finally, to round out the 12 NWSL teams, we have Racing Louisville FC.
We don't see very many changes here. Actually, a little bit shocking considering they did finish 9th last year. You'd think maybe they would, have a few more. But at the end of the day, who knows? Maybe we'll see a couple Canadians here, and they'll scout a couple Canadians after they see this amazing World Cup performance that the women are going to put on. Fingers crossed for that, and definitely hoping that they absolutely crush it this next World Cup.
And that is all the time we have on this NWSL 2023 season preview. I hope you guys all enjoyed it. Big shout out to Jess for coming on and helping us. And as always, be sure to drop a like, drop a sub, and we'll see you soon. Cheers, friends.
We did it. It only took a million tongue twisters of saying NWSL and
it was the Lone Leon got me a few times.